years later, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing on the bank of the Nile River. In his dream, he saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. Then he saw 7 more cows come up behind them from the Nile, but these were scrawny and thin. These cows stood beside the fat cows on the riverbank. Then the scrawny, thin cows ate the 7 healthy fat cows. At this point in the dream, Pharaoh woke up. But he fell asleep again and had a second dream. This time he saw 7 heads of grain, plump and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were shriveled and withered by the east wind. And these thin heads swallowed up the 7 plump, well-formed heads. Then Pharaoh woke up again and realized it was a dream. The next morning, Pharaoh was very disturbed by the dreams, so he called for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. When Pharaoh told them his dreams, not one of them could tell him what they meant. Finally, the king's chief cupbearer spoke up. "Today I have been reminded of my failure," he told Pharaoh. "Some time ago, you were angry with the chief baker and me, and you imprisoned us in the palace of the captain of the guard. One night, the chief baker and I each had a dream, and each dream had its own meaning. There was a young Hebrew man with us in the prison who was a slave of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he told us what each of our dreams meant. And everything happened just as he had predicted. I was restored to my position as cupbearer, and the chief baker was executed and impaled on a pole. Pharaoh sent for Joseph at once, and he was quickly brought from the prison. After he shaved and changed his clothes, he went in and stood before Pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I had a dream last night, and no one here can tell me what it means. But I have heard that when you hear about a dream, you can interpret it." "It is beyond my power to do this," Joseph replied. "But God can tell you what it means and set you at ease." So Pharaoh told Joseph his dream. "In my dream," he said, "I was standing on the bank of the Nile River, and I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river and begin grazing in the marsh grass. But then I saw 7 sick-looking cows, scrawny and thin, come up after them. I've never seen such sorry-looking animals in all the land of Egypt. These thin, scrawny cows ate the 7 fat cows, but afterward you wouldn't have known it, for they were still as thin and scrawny as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I also saw 7 heads of grain, full and beautiful, growing on a single stalk. Then 7 more heads of grain appeared, but these were blighted, shriveled, and withered by the east wind. And the shriveled heads swallowed the 7 healthy heads. I told these dreams to the magicians, but no one could tell me what they mean." Joseph responded, "Both of Pharaoh's dreams mean the same thing. God is telling Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The 7 healthy cows and the 7 healthy heads of grain both represent 7 years of prosperity. The 7 thin, scrawny cows that came up later and the 7 thin heads of grain, withered by the east wind, represent 7 years of famine. This will happen just as I have described it, for God has revealed to Pharaoh in advance what he is about to do. The next 7 years will be a period of great prosperity throughout the land of Egypt. But afterward, there will be 7 years of famine so great that all the prosperity will be forgotten in Egypt. Famine will destroy the land. This famine will be so severe that even the memory of the good years will be erased. As for having 2 similar dreams, it means that these events have been decreed by God, and he will soon make them happen. Therefore, Pharaoh should find an intelligent and wise man and put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt. 34, then Pharaoh should appoint supervisors over the land and let them collect 1/5 of all the crops during the 7 good years. Have them gather all the food produced in the good years that are just ahead and bring it to Pharaoh's storehouses, store it away, and guard it so there will be food in the cities. That way there will be enough to eat when the 7 years of famine come to the land of Egypt. Otherwise, this famine will destroy the land. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. 38. So Pharaoh asked his officials, "Can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second-in-command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, "Kneel down!" So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, "I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval." Then Pharaoh gave Joseph a new Egyptian name, Zaphanath-Paneah. He also gave him a wife, whose name was Asenath. She was the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. So Joseph took charge of the entire land of Egypt. He was 30 years old when he began serving in the court of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. And when Joseph left Pharaoh's presence, he inspected the entire land of Egypt. As predicted, for 7 years, the land produced bumper crops. During those years, Joseph gathered all the crops grown in Egypt and stored the grain from the surrounding fields in the cities. He piled up huge amounts of grain like sand on the seashore. Finally, he stopped keeping records because there was too much to measure. During this time, before the first of the famine years, 2 sons were born to Joseph and his wife Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, the priest of On. Joseph named his older son Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my troubles and everyone in my father's family." Joseph named his second son Ephraim, for he said, "God has made me fruitful in this land of my grief." At last, the 7 years of bumper crops throughout the land of Egypt came to an end. Then the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had predicted. The famine also struck all the surrounding countries, but throughout Egypt there was plenty of food. Eventually, however, the famine spread throughout the land of Egypt as well. And when the people cried out to Pharaoh for food, he told them, "Go to Joseph and do whatever he tells you." So with severe famine everywhere, Joseph opened up the storehouses and distributed grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout the land of Egypt. And people from all around came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe throughout the world.
Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive with us.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to delve into these topics that are both ancient and surprisingly relevant to the modern world.
And today is no exception, right? We're going back in time to ancient Egypt, a land of Pharaoh's pyramids, and, get this surprisingly sophisticated resource management.
Resource management, you might be thinking, what's that got to do with ancient Egypt? Well, that's the beauty of the story we're diving into today.
That's right. We're cracking open the pages of the Bible, specifically the book of Genesis chapter 41, to explore the story of Joseph.
Joseph and Pharaoh, a tale for the ages, really, and one that's so much more than just a story.
It really is. What's fascinating is how this story gives us a glimpse into ancient Egyptian society, their agricultural practices, their spiritual beliefs, all through this lens of dream interpretation and leadership during crisis.
Dreams, those cryptic messages from the subconscious, or in this case, maybe something even more profound.
Right, so let's set the stage. Imagine you're in ancient Egypt, a land ruled by a powerful pharaoh. But even Pharaoh, with all his might, is troubled.
Oh yeah, even the most powerful rulers aren't immune to a restless night's sleep, right?
Exactly. He's haunted by these incredibly vivid dreams. Vivid and more than a little bit strange.
And these aren't just your run-of-the-mill dreams either. The book of Genesis lays it out pretty clearly. 7 healthy cows get devoured by 7 sickly ones, and then 7 plump ears of grain get swallowed up by 7 withered ones. I mean, you got to admit, that's some potent imagery.
Definitely unsettling. It's interesting how these images still tap into this primal fear even today, the fear of scarcity of abundance being overtaken by lack.
Absolutely. It's like this deep human anxiety about having enough, and that's probably why these dreams shook Pharaoh up so much.
For sure. And to top it off, none of his advisors, his wise men, could figure out what the dreams meant.
Can you imagine being the advisor who has to tell the Pharaoh, "Sorry, Your Highness, I've got nothing"?
Talk about pressure. So enter Joseph's stage left.
Our hero, or is he? Well, at this point in the story, he's actually a Hebrew prisoner falsely accused and stuck in prison.
Imprisoned, yet he had this reputation for being able to interpret dreams. Talk about being in the right place at the right time, even if it's a prison cell.
That's the irony, isn't it? It's like the universe has this funny way of playing things out. So Joseph finds himself in this pivotal moment, uniquely positioned to perhaps change the course of Egypt's fate.
Right. And Pharaoh, desperate for answers, summons Joseph from prison.
From prisoner to dream interpreter for the most powerful man in Egypt. That's quite a promotion.
You can practically see it. Joseph standing before Pharaoh, listening to him describe these bizarre dreams, those 7 healthy cows grazing by the Nile. Then, bam, out of nowhere, 7 scrawny, unhealthy cows show up and devour them whole.
Now that's a visual no one would forget. It's like something straight out of a horror movie, except this is ancient Egypt we're talking about, and these dreams were deadly serious.
And as if that wasn't enough, Pharaoh launches into the second dream, those 7 healthy ears of grain suddenly devoured by 7 withered thin ears.
2 dreams, same disturbing theme. It's like someone was trying to send Pharaoh a really clear message.
It's palpable, the anxiety in the air. This wasn't just a dream, this was a message from somewhere, and everyone knew it.
Back then, dreams held immense power. They were seen as messages from the divine omens of things to come. So here you have the king, 2 disturbing dreams, and a whole team of advisors who are stumped. The weight of the world must have felt like it was on Joseph's shoulders.
No pressure, right. So there's Joseph right in the thick of it. A Hebrew prisoner suddenly thrust into the spotlight, tasked with deciphering these ominous dreams for the most powerful man in Egypt.
It's a moment of truth, isn't it? A real test of character, and, maybe a little divine intervention wouldn't hurt either.
Right, because amazingly, Joseph steps up to the plate, and what does he say? He attributes his interpretation not to his own intellect, but to a higher power.
He acknowledges that the interpretation is a gift from God, a way of tapping into something bigger than himself. And I think that's a key point here. Even in ancient times, there was this understanding that sometimes wisdom comes from unexpected sources.
And in this case, the source of that wisdom is about to deliver a prophecy about Egypt's future.
A prophecy that's a bit of a mixed bag, actually.
How so?
Well, Joseph reveals that the 7 healthy cows and those plump ears of grain, they represent 7 years of incredible abundance for Egypt. Think overflowing harvests, granaries bursting at the seams, a time of unprecedented prosperity.
Okay, so a period of good times coming their way, but I can't help but think back to those images in the dream, the swallowing up, the devouring.
Yeah, about that. Those weren't just random details. Those scrawny cows, those withered ears of grain, they foreshadow what comes next 7 years of devastating famine. Joseph's message to Pharaoh is pretty stark. Enjoy the good times while they last, because tough times are on the horizon.
A roller coaster ride indeed, a stark reminder that abundance, even when it seems limitless, can be fleeting.
It's a lesson that's as relevant today as it was back then. Resources, even those that seem plentiful, can dwindle. And it's that understanding that leads us to the truly remarkable part of this story.
Because Joseph doesn't stop at interpreting the dreams, he actually offers a solution.
He does. He goes beyond just prophecy and presents Pharaoh with a tangible plan to navigate this looming crisis. Talk about going the extra mile.
So what's his grand plan? How does he propose to steer Egypt clear of this impending famine?
Get this. He lays out a national resource management strategy that's shockingly sophisticated for its time. He tells Pharaoh to implement a system during those years of plenty to collect and store a portion of the grain harvest.
Essentially creating a national grain reserve, a kind of ancient Egyptian safety net.
You got it. Joseph understood that abundance, while a blessing, could also lead to complacency. By putting aside a portion of the harvest during the good times, they could create a buffer against the inevitable lean years that would follow.
I mean, that's just brilliant. It speaks volumes about the foresight and planning capabilities of the ancient Egyptians.
It does. It shows a deep understanding of agricultural cycles and a willingness to think long-term, something that many civilizations throughout history have struggled with. They weren't just reacting to immediate circumstances, they were strategically anticipating challenges and putting measures in place to mitigate risk.
It's a timeless principle, really, one that's essential for success in any era.
And the key to making it all work. Trust Pharaoh had to trust Joseph's interpretation and his proposed solution.
Which is a pretty big leap of faith considering the messenger is a foreign prisoner.
Right. But that's what makes this story so compelling. It highlights the power of trusting in someone's expertise, even when it comes from an unexpected source. It's about recognizing the value of good ideas, regardless of who they come from.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? This story rooted in antiquity with these dreams and prophecies, but at its core, it's about something so timeless and universal.
It is. It's about human nature, about our relationship with resources, about leadership in times of uncertainty. It's incredible how relevant this story still is, even thousands of years later.
Totally. And, it's not just about ancient history. Those challenges they faced back then resonate so strongly with what we're dealing with today.
Oh, absolutely. Climate change, resource depletion, economic instability. We're constantly grappling with these questions of scarcity and abundance, just like the ancient Egyptians did.
Right. And just like them, we need those long-term solutions, those strategies for navigating uncertainty.
Precisely. Joseph's story isn't just about interpreting dreams. It's about proactive problem solving. It's about recognizing potential challenges and taking action to mitigate risk before it's too late.
And that takes courage, right? To look ahead, to plan for a future that's uncertain.
Absolutely. It takes vision and a willingness to make difficult decisions sometimes, even when things seem okay in the present moment.
But beyond the practicalities of resource management, this story also touches on something deeply human, the power of resilience.
Right. Think about Joseph's journey. He goes from being wrongfully imprisoned to holding a position of immense influence, all because of his ability to tap into his inner strength and wisdom.
It's a testament to the human spirit, isn't it? Our capacity to overcome adversity, even in the face of incredible challenges.
It really is. And then there's the theme of forgiveness, which always adds another layer of complexity to the story.
Because Joseph could have easily harbored resentment and bitterness after everything he'd been through.
He could have, but instead he chooses to use his abilities for good to help those who had wronged him.
It's a powerful reminder that forgiveness, even when it's difficult, can be incredibly empowering.
For everyone involved, it allows us to move forward, to break free from the cycles of anger and resentment, and create a more positive future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of ancient Egypt, what are some key takeaways we can carry with us into our modern lives?
Well, first and foremost, I think it's about embracing a proactive mindset. We can learn from Joseph's example to anticipate challenges and think about solutions even when times are good.
Because as we've seen, abundance can be fleeting. It's about being prepared for those inevitable shifts and turns that life throws our way.
Exactly. And secondly, it's about the importance of leadership, but not just any kind of leadership.
Right. It's about the kind of leadership that's open to new ideas, that values expertise and insight, even when it comes from unexpected sources.
Like Pharaoh did with Joseph. He listened, he trusted, and ultimately he made decisions that benefited his entire society.
It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most courageous and impactful act of leadership is simply to listen, to be open to different perspectives, and to trust in the wisdom of others.
Because sometimes those unconventional voices of those who come from different backgrounds or experiences, they hold the key to unlocking solutions we never even considered.
It's about recognizing that we don't always have all the answers, and that's okay. In fact, that's where true growth and innovation often begin. And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into ancient Egypt. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure exploring these timeless themes with you.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, even ancient stories can hold surprising wisdom for our modern lives.